Hello, hello, hello. This is Caleb Jones, and this is the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. And today I'm going to talk about a project that I've been working on for quite a while that is about to end, more or less end in about a month, and then completely end in about 3 months, and that is me moving out of the United States permanently. I've been talking about this sporadically the last few years. And if you know my history, some of this is going to be old news for you. This background is going to be old news for you. But basically, I've been thinking about moving out of the United States since around 2003. I've talked about before, podcasts, articles, videos about that. And then I made the solemn decision to move out of the United States around 2011 or so, 2012, somewhere there, quite a while ago, 8 years ago. And I wanted several things in place before I moved out of the country. And one of the big things was that I wanted my kids to grow up and move out of the house and be in their 20s and be somewhat independent before I did that. And now that is the case. And so back then, around 2011, 2012, my plan was to move out of the United States in 2025. Several years ago, I saw the writing on the wall, and I knew this was probably back around, I would say around 2018, 2017, somewhere in there. I said, I saw the economy. I saw where the economy was going. I saw where politically this country was going. I saw culturally where this country was going. And I said, holy shit, I do not want to wait till 2025. It's going to get much worse in the United States well before 2025. So I moved up that plan from 2025 to 2021. Well, as of now, it is 2021, and I will be moving out of the country on February 8th. So in about a month or 3 weeks from when you hear this podcast or when this podcast goes up. So I would love to tell you where I'm going, but as I've mentioned in the past, for legal reasons, I am not allowed to tell you where I'm going, or at least verbally state where I'm going before I'm actually there. So by mid-February, I will tell you where I am going because I will be there. Some of you have already guessed where I'm going. And so it's not like I'm trying to keep it a secret or anything. I just can't verbally state it. So I have to play this little fun game in this podcast where I'm going to tell you about some things I'm doing moving out of the country without stating the specific country this is. But in 3 weeks, I'll be able to tell you and give you much more data. But anyway, I get a lot of questions about this, about, well, how are you moving out of the country? Logistically, how are you handling it? How are you finding a place? What are you going to do? Blah, 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 blah. So in this podcast, I'm going to overview some of the logistical steps that I'm proceeding and going through now, both recently and right now, and tell you how I'm doing this. And by the way, a lot of you have asked for a 5 Flags Internationalizing Your Alpha 2.0 Lifestyle book or course or something like that from me. That is coming. It's not coming today or tomorrow because I only talk about things I have done. And as of this recording of this podcast, I haven't moved out of the country yet, and I have not fully internationalized my financial and business life yet. That will be done in a few months. So definitely in a few months, I have a lot of stuff coming on 5 Flags, how you can break out your life into 4, 5, 6 different countries to maximize your freedom, maximize your travel, minimize your taxes. This is why I'm doing this, by the way. And by the way, that's the main reason I'm doing this. Unlike most Americans, I'm not moving out of the United States because of political reasons. I'm a libertarian. I lose every election. I'm used to it. So that's not for political reasons, although I completely disagree with the politics of my country. I hate big government, and both left-wingers and Trump supporters love big government. So, I mean, I guess that is one of the lower, smaller factors. But the main reason I'm moving out of the United States is for tax purposes. I don't like getting raped in terms of paying taxes. And as I've written about before and given specific numbers on, Americans are among the highest taxed people literally in the entire planet, literally in the entire world. And I don't want to be in that category anymore. Now, that's one of the first questions I get, or topics that guys bring up when I talk about this is, well, Caleb, are you going to pay 0 American taxes? Or they'll say, Caleb, you realize guys who come by my videos or come by my podcasts or articles out of context without knowing my other content, they'll say, you're crazy. You can't get out of paying American taxes. Only if you renounce. Even if you move out of the country, you got to pay some American tax. Correct. You have to pay some American taxes. So I am reducing my taxes dramatically by moving out of the United States, but I am not bringing them to 0. And they will never be to 0, I don't think. Unless I renounce my citizenship. But even then, I may incur taxes in other countries where I'm earning income and things like that. But my objective for 5 Flags, for moving out of the United States, is to bring my current tax burden from around 14% which is what it is right now. I pay around, I haven't done my tax returns for 2020 yet, but I pay around 14% in total taxes, which is fucking fantastic for an American. But even that, in my opinion, is way too much. Again, I'm an anarchist libertarian. My goal is to bring my taxes to 4% or less, 4% of my income or less. So I will definitely be hitting that this year. Definitely at 4%. I mean, worst case scenario might be 4 or 5%, but definitely 4%. I should be hitting that by the end of the year this year, which will be a wonderful, wonderful thing. But 4% is not zero. So anyone who thinks that I'm trying to pay zero American taxes is incorrect. I will be paying some percentage of my income in taxes, just 4%. And by the way, I am a minarchist libertarian. I am not an anarchist. I am not against the concept of paying taxes. I just want to pay taxes 3, 4, 5% of my income to pay for basic shit that I actually use, like roads, like police and military protection, stuff I actually use. Not for bailing out multi-bazillionaire bankers, not for giving money to people who haven't had a job in 7 years because they won't go on a job interview, not for bombing 7, 8, 9 countries. These are stupid things. Not for paying interest on a massive debt. These are stupid things that Americans pay taxes for. That's why you have to pay anywhere from 51 to 70% of your total taxes as an American. And that's the percentage you pay. But anyway, I don't like that. So I'm going to move out of the United States and rejigger my financial life into ways where I can do that. Now, another question I get is, well, Caleb, how are you doing that? How exactly are you structuring your finances and your businesses? Are you doing the foreign earned income exclusion? Are you doing XYZ? I can't get into details on that because what I'm doing is reasonably complicated and reasonably expensive. And it doesn't really apply in terms of what I'm doing with my companies unless you make at least $200,000 a year to even make it worthwhile for what I'm doing. And I make multiples of that. So it's not really relevant to you. Under normal conditions, any normal American can move out of the United States and take advantage of what's called the foreign earned income exclusion. And that means the first $106,000 you earn in a given year is almost tax-free. You don't pay state or federal income taxes on that stuff. There's a few little taxes you might pay, but that's it. And the catch with that is you can only spend a maximum of 35 days per year in the United States. That is not, by the way, what I'm doing. I'm doing something slightly different and more complicated and more expensive. That doesn't probably apply to you. And that, frankly, is a second step or a separate step to moving out of the United States. Most of that is moving my business entities offshore and creating new offshore business entities and things like that. Maybe at some point I will cover that in a future podcast, but that's not really relevant in terms of moving out of the country. So maybe I'm actually a little off topic here. But anyway, so in terms of moving out of the country, I get a lot of questions about how I'm finding a place. Let's talk about that. So what I plan on doing is on February 8th, I will be in my new country. I'll just call it my new country. And I will be there for about 2 months, 6 weeks or so, actually. Then I'm going to come back to the United States, pick up Pink Firefly, because Pink Firefly will not be moving out with me on February 8th. She will instead be moving in late March. So in late March, I'm going to come back for about 2 weeks, pack everything up that we're taking and get her and her stuff and move her out to my new country. And at that point, her and I will find a place to permanently settle down. And so what I will do in the interim, in those first 6 weeks, I'm just going to rent an Airbnb or something, maybe even a hotel room. I really don't know, don't care. Probably an Airbnb because it's going to be for 6 weeks. And I'll just chill out there and kind of set up a lot of my logistics there while I'm there and maybe look at a few places too. I've already looked at a few places in the past. And then that way, once Pink Firefly comes out, her and I can hit the ground running. Now, obviously, most of the men listening to this podcast are not married and do not need to worry about a wife or OLTR wife you're moving with, which is an advantage for you. This complicates things a little bit on my end, but I planned in advance for this, so it's not a big deal. But irrelevant to the fact that I have a wife and you don't, or maybe you don't, maybe you do, I don't know. That's the way you want to do it. You don't just want to move somewhere and just buy a house or move somewhere and put an entire year lease down on an apartment somewhere. You need to go there at least several times so you know it well. And then once you go there, spend a month and just get an Airbnb or a cheap hotel room or something like that and get to know the area first before you make any long-term commitments. I think it's very dangerous. Even in your own country, I do this. If you're moving to a new city, same deal. I don't just find a place and just buy it or again, put a year lease on it. You're stuck there for a year. It might look great to you. And then you realize that it's in a weird part of town. The streets are weird or the neighbors are weird. So get to know the area first before you put your money down on that stuff. Plus, here's the other thing too, is that you need to check in your country what the visa requirements are and residency requirements are for leasing property. I mean, you're probably not going to buy property there unless you're investing. But for leasing property, there are some countries that have to see that you are either a full-time resident or in process of being a resident before you can even lease property there. So check that out first before you before you make offers on any apartments. That's another thing too, is a problem that I have run into in this process is that in terms of getting an apartment in my new country, at the last minute, I found out that you basically have to add 11% onto the price of the apartment for things like fees, and some of which are refundable and some are not, but I didn't know that. And so I was actually seriously considering getting one place or looking into one place. And then I realized the last minute, the agent told me, hey, you understand that the fees work here, right, in this country? I said, well, I'm sure there are some miscellaneous fees. He goes, well, it works like this. And he kind of laid it all out. I went, oh, shit. That dramatically raises the amount of rent over a course of a year that I'll have to come up with in terms of cash flow and things like that and budgeting. So it was good to know those things. And frankly, it was something I should have known before I knew it. Another issue is banking. Do you need to set up a new checking account and get new debit cards and credit cards for your new country? Not really. Depends on what you've got in terms of your current banking setup. But most Western banks, I'm assuming you're coming from a Western country, most Western banks have debit cards that will work in other countries. There might be an international charge or there might not. So definitely something to find out is whether or not your bank charges transaction fees on international transactions. And if they do, how much are they and what countries do they apply to? And if they do, that's not great. Maybe you should get a different bank in your home country that doesn't charge those fees, or go ahead and set up a checking account. In some places you may have to do this, especially if you go to a more third world type place. Set up a checking account at a local bank and just use that as an operational account. Now, in terms of 5 flags, and you don't have to do 5 flags to move out of your country. I am, but you don't. You can just move out of your country and not do 5 flags. But in terms of 5 flags, you don't want assets in the country in which you live. So you need to be very careful about this. So if you're doing 5 flags, be very careful about setting up a checking account where you live. You probably don't want to do that. You want to set it up either in your home country without international fees, or maybe a similar country, a neighboring country in the region of your country where you can run that debit card or write those checks or what have you in your new country without incurring any international transaction fees. Very important. And, we could make an argument. You could make the argument, well, Caleb, shit, I make the Alpha Male 2.0 minimum of $75,000 a year. I'm just going to have a checking account in my new country that is just operational cash, $1,000, $2,000 a month, and that's it. And it goes out, and then another $2,000 comes in, and it never goes beyond $2,000. All of my real assets are outside the country. That might be fine. Just be careful if you're doing 5 flags. And if you're not doing 5 flags, do whatever the fuck you want. Set up accounts wherever you want. But I am doing 5 flags, which means I am not going to purchase the property where I live. I purposely do not want assets in this new country. I don't want any assets there. If I want to follow 5 flags, and I do, I don't want any assets in this new country. I'm just going to get residency in the new country, not citizenship, because that's different, but residency, and get a year lease on something, and that's it. That's it. Now, I am considering investing in this country. It's a country that might do well in certain areas, so I am considering investing there. But if I do that down the road, it will be a violation of 5 flags, so it's a decision I'll have to make at that time. My investments and my assets will all be outside of this country and outside the United States. So as of now, and this has been the case for quite a while, I have no American assets. I have no American stocks. I have no American bonds. I have no American real estate at the moment. I have no American assets, unless I'm forgetting about something little somewhere in my portfolio I've forgotten about. I have literally no American assets other than the fact that I own American dollars in a lot of my investment accounts. So, outside the fact I own American currency, I own no American assets. So it's going to be interesting is once I make this move, I will have no assets in my original country, the USA, or no assets in my new country. I'll have no assets in either country. Total 5 flags. Love it to death. All my assets are either in other countries or they are stateless assets, things like cryptocurrency, precious metals, and things like that. I own a lot of both those things. So those are not really assigned to any one country. Another factor you need to consider when moving out of the country, and I've addressed this on prior content, prior videos and articles, is whether or not you want to get full residency in that country or citizenship in that country if you're not doing Five Flags. I'll discuss that in a minute. Or if you're just going to do visa hopping. So there's 3 options. I'll cover them really quick. Option 1 is you just go there as a foreigner, and every 90 days or whatever your visa expires, you leave the country and then you come back. In some cases, you can just hop in a car and drive to across the border and spend a day across the border, then come back and just get your passport stamped, and the country doesn't care, and that's fine. If that's not an option, you may have to hop on a plane and go somewhere else. If you live a true international lifestyle, you're probably traveling enough already. So if you travel once every 90 days already, and I certainly do, excluding 2020 with COVID, but then that may not be a problem for you. But be aware, you have to do that. I have a brother who has done that. Actually, my son and my brother. So my brother and my son both do that. They live abroad, and they just do the visa thing every 90 days, 180 days, or not 180. It depends on the country, depends on the scenario. 60 days. They make sure to just leave their country and go somewhere and come back. And they just do that all the time. And if that doesn't bother you, that's the easiest thing to do. You don't have to do any paperwork. You don't have to register for residency or any of that stuff. You just do that. Perfectly fine. That does work. I know a lot of guys who do that. Another option is to get residency, which is not citizenship. That's different. Residency is where you get some kind of card that says that you can be there a year at a time or 10 years at a time. You just renew it. It's very easy, and you don't have to do any visa hopping. You can literally just stay there all year or much longer, and you don't have to worry about bouncing around to reset your visa all the time. It's kind of nice. There's a little paperwork involved. There's a process involved. You may have to deposit some money in a bank account. Every country is different. The third option is citizenship. That's where you actually get a passport in that country, and that usually requires X number of years of residency, not visa hopping, but residency, or you investing in something and spending a lot of money. If you're doing Five Flags, you do not want to be a citizen of where you live, because if you're a citizen of where you live, they can tax you more easily, and you're more subject to their bullshit laws. So it's actually better from a freedom standpoint and a low tax standpoint to not be a citizen of where you live. So where I am moving to, I will not be a citizen, and I will never be a citizen. I don't want to be a citizen. Not that I don't like the country. I really like the country a lot. It's going to be my new home. But I don't want to be a citizen there because I don't want to be subject to those citizenship-based laws. In addition to the fact that if you're a citizen, then you have to give a shit about what happens in the country. The reason so many Americans are so pissed off right now about what's going on in America the last several years is because they're Americans. If you don't have an American passport, do you give a shit about Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Hillary or the American economy? Or no, who cares? You don't have to care. It's kind of nice. So you have to be aware of these things if you're a citizen, generally speaking. The next logistical item in terms of moving to my new country is what I'm going to move and what I'm going to not move and replace. So in my case, what I've decided to do is I've decided to take the bulk of my stuff in my house, my furniture, clothing, things like that. Not the bulk of my stuff, but the bigger stuff, the couches and stuff that I want to get rid of, and move those down to Scottsdale, Arizona after selling it. So let me be more clear. So right now, Pink Firefly and I live out in Washington State. We live between Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. And when we move, we're going to sell all the crap in our house that we don't want to move, as much as we can, ideally, including the big bulky furniture. Then the big bulky stuff that would be too expensive to ship to this new country, we're going to box it up, put it in a pod, moving pod, and we're going to send that down to Scottsdale, Arizona. And that'll happen in late March when I come back to pick up Pink Firefly to go to our new home. And it's just going to sit down there for a few months. And then in the summer, we're going to come back to the United States, and we're going to get a house in Scottsdale, Arizona, that will be a rental property that I just rent. And that'll be my flag in the United States. It will not be my home. It'll be my flag. It'll be a place where I can visit. It'll kind of be my home base in the United States when I visit the U.S. in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you don't really have that option, and most of you probably won't, then just sell all your stuff. And if it's really, really, really important, you could ship it to your new country. Now, this is something I learned from my sister. One of my sisters is that it is cheaper to fly with stuff as check-on baggage in a big box than it is to ship something to another country, especially if your country is far away. And the country I'm moving to is quite far away from the United States. So it would cost me a fucking fortune to ship big piles of boxes over to my new home. And it takes about a month. It takes a long, long time. So instead, what I'm doing is that every time I go to this country, I'm going to box up 3, 4, 5 boxes, as much as the airline will allow me to do, pay the extra baggage fees for the airline, and just send them with me, fly with me on the airplane to my new location. Yes, it'll cost a lot of baggage fees, but it actually costs less than shipping the stuff. So that's a helpful little tidbit that'll save you a lot of money. And obviously, if you have something you want to ship that is too big for that, you'll have to ship it. But it's going to cost a lot of money. It just makes more sense to buy the shit there. So what I'm going to do is ship over the minimum I need to ship. And I don't really have a lot of stuff. Matter of fact, I have very little stuff. I don't live a minimalist lifestyle, but damn near. I don't have a lot of stuff. I just don't. I don't care. So what minimum I'm going to ship over there, I'm going to bring with me on the plane. It might take 1 or 2 trips, and that's fine. Because as I said, I'm going to go there both in February and in March. So I'll have an ample opportunity to bring a lot of stuff there. Then anything big over there, furniture, big equipment, I will purchase there. As a matter of fact, for my YouTube videos, I write on an electronic digital whiteboard. It's called a Samsung Flip 2. It's a very awesome, very expensive piece of equipment. And that thing would cost a fortune to ship to my new country. So I'm just going to put that down in Scottsdale. And when I visit Scottsdale and do YouTube videos down there, I will just use it there, and I will buy a new one out in my new country. But gosh, Caleb, isn't that expensive to buy 2 of everything? Yeah, but I make a lot of money, and the amount of money I'm saving in taxes more than covers for this. Don't worry. The amount of money I'm saving in taxes, I make a pretty high income. So bringing my taxes from 14% down to less than 4% is a lot of money for me. And that is, in terms of my income now, my income goes up every year. So this is a very profitable move for me. I can more than easily afford to cover the cost of extra furniture over there. But Caleb, does that mean you'll be renting 2 places? Are you going to rent your Scottsdale place full time? Yes, at least for the time being, next year or 2 or 3. That way I have a consistent place where I can store stuff in the United States, visit the United States, do meetings and do business in the United States, and to help my wife, Pink Firefly, who was extremely nervous about moving out of the United States. This is a woman who has never visited another country before she met me. And so she's a little nervous about this, as you might imagine. And so there will be times that she leaves me in my new home to go back to the United States on her own, just to not miss the United States. I want to make sure she's comfortable with doing that. But again, if you don't have a wife, you don't have that problem, so don't worry about it. And if you do have a wife, you need to make accommodations for that, go ahead and do that. If you're hopefully if you have a wife, that means you're older, and that hopefully means you're a higher income guy and you can afford this kind of stuff. But again, the expenses that I'm incurring to make this move are more than paid for by the amount of taxes I will be saving. Matter of fact, I've already begun to save taxes with the stuff that I'm doing. So just the tax savings alone that I've already had, combined with the income growth I've had over the last 6 to 12 months, I've already benefited from this stuff. Next logistical item is that you need to figure out medical insurance. So the easiest way to do this is, and I'm not completely done with this process, I'm in process and doing this now, is to contact your current healthcare provider, your current health insurance provider, and ask them what your options are in terms of getting you covered in your new home. If you're going to go to your new home and never really come back to your old home, then you might want to just get an international healthcare plan or add an international rider on your current healthcare plan, whichever is cheaper. There are so many different healthcare plans in so many different countries. There's no way I could give you specifics on this other than to contact your healthcare provider and ask them questions. Say, hey, I'm moving to this country. I want to be covered in this country. What are my options? And if they say, I don't know, or you don't have any, then it's time to get on Google and Google citizens in your country, how you get medical insurance abroad or international health insurance. That's something you can look at. If you are moving somewhere where the healthcare is inferior or could possibly be inferior to where you're moving from, and I did an entire video on this, so it's not really a big deal, because even quote unquote shithole countries usually, not always, but usually have in every major city a very expensive for them, fancy hospital for rich people who live there and Westerners who live there. And these hospitals have the equivalent level of healthcare services that you would find in the West. Where I'm moving, that's not gonna be a problem. It has very, very good healthcare, so I'm not concerned about that. But if you are moving to somewhere where the healthcare is either not as good or more difficult to get to, then I would recommend you get all of your final checkups, physicals, blood tests, all that stuff. Get all that stuff done before you leave. And maybe in terms of your long-term healthcare, if you're over the age of 35, this is important. You might want to consider going to another country, a third country, to get these healthcare tests done, a place with really good healthcare like Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, places like that have really good healthcare. Go there to get your once-a-year physicals and or your blood tests. Next thing you need to figure out is your phone, your cell phone. So this is pretty simple these days. 10, 20 years ago when I traveled internationally, getting cell service in another country was a bitch. I mean, you could do it. You had to get like special kinds of phones and all this crap. All you have to make sure of is that your phone is unlocked. Some phones are locked and some aren't. If your phone is unlocked, great. You just go to your new country and get a SIM card and you're usually done. Pretty easy. If your phone is locked, you're kind of fucked. You got to get a new phone. Maybe get a new phone number and change your phone number and do the WhatsApp thing where you have to notify everyone your new fucking phone number and all that garbage and make sure you get a SIM card for that. You could also get a VoIP phone number, voice over IP phone number. You get them online for free. Google Voice, you can use that. And that way you can get a phone number that is still in the area code of your old country. If you want to maintain contacts there, that's fine. What I currently do now, and it's kind of expensive, but it works so far, is that I'm not going to tell you my phone carrier. I don't think that's safe for my security, but my current phone carrier in the United States has a plan where whenever I'm international, it automatically detects that I'm in an international country outside of the United States. And every day that I'm there, it adds $10. So it's a $10 fee per day. And it gives me everything I have on my current plan in that new country. So unlimited voice, unlimited texting, and something like 15 gigs of data, shitloads of data. I don't even use it all. It gives me all that stuff in the new country. Now, sometimes the internet is a little slow in this using this international plan. So that is not a long-term solution for me. That's just a travel solution. What I may end up doing is have like a home base phone in my new country and then an international phone where I can click on international plans as I travel. I haven't really decided how to do that in terms of traveling once I move. But anyway, I use an Android phone and I'm pretty sure this is unlocked. I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked into this yet. Obviously, I haven't done all these things yet. A lot of this stuff I'm going to deal with once I'm over there in February. But that's just something else you have to be aware of. How are you going to get internet once you're in your new location? You don't want to be a Wi-Fi monkey where you're constantly looking for Wi-Fi. Some of my FBs do that. They have no phone signals. They constantly ask for Wi-Fi wherever they are, and that's how they communicate with the world. Because you can text and even call people now using nothing but Wi-Fi, which is fine. But for lifestyle purposes, I don't think you should do that. Last item on this list that I'm covering in this podcast, there's a lot more items I'll cover in the future, but the last item is how to handle driving. So for me, my plan is to never own a car ever again for the rest of my life once I move. So I'm actually going to sell my car in the next week or two here. And that will be, hopefully, if it's up to me, that'll be the last car I ever own. I do not want to own a car. Even if I live out in a suburban area, I don't want a car. I don't want to mess with a car. I hate driving. I don't hate driving. It's just that when I'm driving, I can't do much else. And there's no point for me to drive. I can just sit in the back seat and have an Uber or Lyft guy drive me around. I also use a service called Wings, which is WINGS, which is available in certain parts of the US, where you can get the same driver every time, which is pretty cool. As my income goes up, I plan on hiring an actual driver, a literal on-call driver for me. Not a full-time driver, but a driver, or maybe two who alternate, who drive me around. I'd much rather do that than own a fucking car. Owning a car is just such a hassle. There's a bunch of expenses involved. And I'm not a super car guy. Cars are cool, but I'm not a car guy. I was in my 20s, but these days I just don't give a fuck. I don't want to deal with it, especially with my travel schedule. So right now I own a car and it sits in the garage for months a year because I'm gone. On and on and on. I will never own a car. So I don't need to worry about, in terms of car logistics, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to not own a car and rely on Uber, Lyft, taxis, mass transit, and down the road, hopefully sooner rather than later, a actual full-time driver or an assigned driver. Now, my wife, on the other hand, my beautiful wife, wants a fucking car. So she wants a Range Rover. So we're going to lease her a car. And what we're going to do is you can get a lease a month at a time where we're moving. So we're going to have a lease at a time there. So we're going to have a month at a time. And that way, when she's not there, we just return the car. And when she comes back out, we just get her a new car. And that way she can have a car. Now, she will need to get an international driver's license. And you can get that, if you're an American, you can get that through AAA. If you're European, Australian, New Zealander, or Canadian, I don't know how to do that. You'll have to research that in your own country. And that's good. That's good enough for about a year or even longer in most countries. It's basically a little rider you get. and it's internationally recognized. If you're going to stay there long term and drive a lot, you will have to get a driver's license in your new country, although it really depends on the country. South American countries may not care. Asian countries are probably going to care. So it depends on the region you're moving to, and that means you present your old driver's license or your driver's license from your home country, and you may have to take a test, either a written test or a behind the wheel test. You have to get that done. I would strongly recommend you just don't own a car. And certainly if you're going to move to a city, anywhere close to a big city, you don't need a car. But we're honestly getting to the point now where even if you don't live in a city, even if you live in a suburb, you can't live in a rural area, but if you live in a suburb or even a reasonably distant outer suburb, you almost don't need a car unless you just love owning a car. I've wanted to get rid of my car for a long time, but with COVID and everything else last year, I just never got around to it. But now I'm getting rid of my car. So as of February 8th of this year, just a few weeks, I will not own a car. I will be carless. And I'm very, very happy about this. I don't want to own a car. It's such a hassle. And I like my car. I drive a Lexus. It's very nice, but I don't want it. So that's it for now. I have a lot more podcasts, certainly a lot more videos and articles coming up on moving out of the country as I do this. I will document pieces of this in terms of when I do it and how I do it. And then in a few months, I'll have something more comprehensive for you if you want to spend a little money, where I can show you exactly how to do 5 flags of what I'm doing to maximize my freedom, maximize my lifestyle, minimize my taxes, and as an extra added benefit in my case, escaping a rapidly collapsing country called the United States. As I record this podcast, it has been just a few days since the psycho Trump supporters stormed the Capitol for no reason. And so basically the Trump supporters have become the left-wingers in terms of rioting for no reason. So last summer, it was the left-wingers who were rioting. Now it's the Trump supporters who are rioting. And as I've talked about, Americans just have to get used to regular civil unrest on a regular basis now in the cities for the rest of your lives as America goes to its next phase of further collapse. I am moving to a country that is not collapsing and where there is no civil unrest ever. So as an extra benefit, I can escape out of this country that is driving me nuts, especially lately, especially the last few years, because my observation several years ago that America would get much worse, much faster than 2025 has proven correct. Just in the last year and a half, you know what's happened inside the United States. So I was right about this. I cannot wait to leave. It has been something I've wanted to do for a long time. I feel like a senior in high school with senioritis, that last month of school where you're like, oh, I want to get out of here. That's how I have felt for the past year or so. So I'm very, very happy to make this transition. It's going to be a decent amount of work and some hassle the first few months, but once it's done, I'm going to be set for life. It's going to be great. And I'll be able to do some things in my business life that I wasn't able to do before or easily do before. I'll talk about that later too. So I will see you very soon. Have fun. Bye.